Man in the Middle show with Kevin and Joe. I'm Kevin, and that is Joe. Good to see you, Joe.
What up? What up?
What up? We're thinking today about choices versus chance in our lives and what we do with the information we were given, the examples we were given, and what are sort of the crossroads moments where we made maybe a not outwardly obvious decision to move in a different direction, but we did. And looking back, we see those as crossroads moments, but in the moment, it may have just felt intrinsic. Joe, last night I went to see the Springsteen movie, Deliver Me from Nowhere. And I know you haven't had a chance to see it yet, but it's a beautiful film more than anything. And what struck me was it's very much about Bruce's relationship with his dad. And his dad, it's the classic case of doing the best he could, but not really giving into his anger and his fear. There's a great scene, and if you haven't seen it, I'll do my best not to spoil anything, but there's a great scene where Bruce is sitting up in his room, starting to think artist Bruce thoughts, and his dad comes in from a fresh argument downstairs with his wife and decides it's a good time to toughen Bruce up. And he doesn't do it by hitting him. He just holds up his hands and he's, in a very intimidating way, showing him how to throw punches. Wrong hand, other hand, and Bruce is like reluctant, but then he starts getting mad and then his dad smacks him. And he's like, see, kid, you got to protect your face. You got to protect your face. I don't know if you can relate to that exact moment. I certainly can. My dad had a similar approach to wanting to toughen me up, because in the only example he had of getting tougher was a neighborhood kid saying, if you don't go fight that kid, I'm going to kick your ass, after seeing him get bullied by a neighborhood kid. And my dad did the same to me. I was getting bullied when we moved to Florida, and he locked me out of the house, and he said, don't come back until you fight that kid. And to my shock, I went and did it. And I just laid there and let him kick my ass because I still didn't want to fight. But at least I did what he told me to do. I actually faced the kid. And that was big. That was an important moment. But it's not a nurturing kind of, hey, you're going to be okay. And you're okay with who you are. But you got to learn to throw a punch. Otherwise, you're going to take a lot of punches that you don't need to take, right? You got to have the balls to stand up to people. And then there's a scene at the end that I'll be a little less descriptive about because it would be a spoiler, because it's really the climax of the movie. But there's a moment with Bruce and his father, and we talked about this on an episode in season 1, that we're both so grateful to have those conversations with our dad when we had the chance, for them to kind of ask us, to say to us, hey, I did the best I could, and I know I didn't get it right all the time, and for us to be able to look at them and go, you did great, Pop. I appreciate you. That's and so it brings into question a lot of things about generational context. Our fathers hopefully wanting to do a little better than their fathers, and then incremental improvements down the line generationally. But also what struck me about it was, now that I'm spending more time with my dad and getting to know him on a sort of like who he is as a person, without, when you only see them so often, it's this, everybody's kind of on their, it's like a first date in a sense. It's like, kind of catch up and tell the same stories again and just check in. Like, we still love each other. We're still doing okay. See you next time. Now I'm seeing him at least once a month, and we hang out. And it's interesting where his mind goes when we share stories and what he still reflects on. And it seems to me, and I say this without judgment, that a lot of his primary memories are based in fear. He recalled a story, and it was interesting that I remembered it quite differently than he did, but we still remembered the same outcome, which was a road rage incident where a guy, he pulled over on the highway and a guy got out, and the guy came to the car And my dad rolled down the window and the guy just barked him down. And it's one of those moments you realize, like, oh, I've bitten off a little more than I could chew here. And then he's got me next to him going, Dad, please just don't, just drive away. It's not worth it. I'm very scared. And the guy said some real dickish thing like, yeah, listen to your kid. He's the smart one. Better fucking check yourself. Blah, 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 you know. And of course, that's been eating my dad ever since. But it's interesting to me that like he still wants to punch that guy. And he still wants to punch the guy who barked him down for taking too long to pick a lottery ticket at Publix a couple years ago. You know, my dad's 77 and riddled with Parkinson's, and he's not going to land a punch anywhere for the rest of his days on earth. But he gets physically fired up when he talks. Boy, I'd love to see that guy, and boy, I think I would do it. I think, and I'm like, Dad, you know. So there's no. What I read from that is there was no body in his life who took him aside and said, hey, man, there's another way to think about this. There's another way to, there's other skills to nurture, and there's other ways to process these moments that don't have to get you angry all over again. You know, use some of those things as fuel as needed, but at a certain point, in a low threshold of a point, it's only holding you back. It's causing you negative energy. And so
that's a lot of power to give someone you don't even like.
Yeah, right. That's
from 3 years ago or 30 years ago.
Right. And so I don't know. It's just wanted to share this with you because I know that you spent a lot of time with your pop his whole life, but certainly towards the end of his life, and feel grateful for some moments and conversations you were able to have for him. You've told me that when you get into your car, what is the moment when you always think of him? Is you put on a certain music or something, or that's when you would call him?
Oh yeah. So the thinking of when I would get in the car, um, whether I was like going somewhere or coming home from work, you know,
Right.
I would always like automatically think to call him,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And after he first passed, it was like automatic all the time,
Mm, yeah.
you know. It's like when you go to the urinal and you think about pulling your phone out, you know, or something like that,
Just
you
to have it.
know,
Right.
just to have it,
Your
you
brain
know.
to
It's
have
like,
it. Yeah.
yeah, so you've conditioned your mind to your body wants to do something repetitively that it's experienced over and over again, and then you realize that it's not possible, right? And then eventually that starts to go away, but every now and then, you know, it surfaces, and it's just kind of like, man, I wish I could call my dad right now, and that's kind of like more about what it is, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But I think the I think a question though that I would ask you is like, where in that whole thing that you're talking about with your dad, like, where do you see part of you in that? Or like, where do you see part of him, that part of him in you with that?
Yeah. For sure. You know, I see it directly when I was younger. You know, I was a hothead. I would fly off the handle. Road rage was automatic. Jealousy was at the forefront when it came to relationships. The few snaps I can remember that were dangerous snaps where like I'm lucky the person I snapped on didn't respond the way they could have. So I was not prepared to handle what I had created. Were over girls. And you know, it's interesting now, just looking through the lens of jealousy, Joe. I couldn't muster it if I had to. I just do not own jealousy anymore. And I don't know if that's, I see it through the lens of a relationship I had where that is still very much a factor, a known factor, and in something like an embraced factor of their being. Oh, I'm just a jealous person. And that's, you know,
I hate I hate those statements.
me too, that
You
I'm
know, oh,
just,
I'm just the way this is just the way I am.
you know, the one that gets me every time. Oh, I'm horrible with names. Well, fucking quit being horrible with names. It's one of the easiest things to fix.
Yeah. It's a rationalization for having the total inability to think about someone else other than yourself.
Yeah. Right. But but then so yeah, the interesting I think thought that leads from your question is that is kind of what I pondered, and I thought because it's easy to say, well, ooh, yeah, what's the old phrase? Apple doesn't fall from far from the tree, or he comes by it honestly. I don't like that one either because I feel like it's people say it because it feels inclusive and tribal, but it's usually in a negative context, like, oh well, they don't need to fix that because the guy comes from Aunt Cheryl and she was that way, and what the fuck. Um, and for me, um, I just know that along the way, I was blessed with better guides. When I started doing comedy when I was 18, as I look back in the lens of my life, it was a far more epic event in the friends I made through that endeavor rather than even the experiences I had doing comedy for 10 years. My friend Lou, my friend Tom, my friend Billy, these are still my best friends in life. And they were the big brothers I never had. They knew all the cool stuff. They would sit me down and talk me through things because I was the kind of teenager, Joe, who wanted to be more pissed off than I had a right to be. I don't know if you remember, MTV had a little cartoon called Stevie Washington, the Angry Youth. And that was my Lou gave me that nickname. He called me Stevie Washington when I acted uppity. And they laugh at me because they're like, "What are you pissed at?" Okay, your parents got divorced when you were 13. That it? Like you ever starve? You ever been homeless? You're like, cut it out. You don't get to be that pissed off. Which is a little dismissive, but it was accurate. Um, but through them and through other people and through them, I think that they opened up my receptors to that there's another way and there's a better way and there's a higher plane way of seeing the world and processing your emotions that are more productive and more gratifying. And maybe people you meet who aren't maybe as quote unquote evolved, and that's what the concept to me of chance versus choice. Was it just that they never had the chance because nobody showed up in their life like that to have those conversations with them? Or did people try and they chose to push them away because they were only comfortable in their current existence?
Yeah. I mean, that's really powerful. Because again, it's more about like going to get what you need, right? Um,
We
which
have to
again,
know what you
for
need. We have to know what you need first, or is that, or maybe you don't. You find out what you need late. You needed later.
I think, I think that if you're not getting, what you need at home, you're gonna go find it somewhere else. Um, and that's one of the reasons why, you see so much influence from friends.
Yeah,
A lot of it just has to do with proximity, right?
yeah.
So that's why it's so important to choose your friends well. And that can determine a lot of the health of your future. So that's probably why you've had such a really strong adult life in terms of stability and health, right? Um, whereas mine was very different, and it wasn't until I made changes to those relationships where things began to really skyrocket for me,
Mm,
right?
mm-hmm.
But I think the biggest reason why I asked you that question is because in Hollis's book Finding Meaning in the Second Half of Life, he says the real work of midlife is to make peace with the Father, both the one who raised us and the one who lives within us.
Ooh.
So it's like my goal then isn't to like reject my father. Or even like idolize him, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's to integrate,
Mm.
right? And it's to sit with both all of that wounding and all of that wisdom. And when I can integrate that and I can sit with both, then I'm usefully whole,
Mm,
right?
mhm.
And so that's what it was for me because things as by the time you're in midlife, things have really reversed. Your parents are essentially in their 60s or 70s, depending on when they had you. My dad had me at 36. So by the time, you know, I was by the time I was, well, number one, like when I turned 40, um, I didn't have my dad, right? But again, if we're saying midlife starts around 35, essentially, okay, great. So, you know, at 35, my dad's already in his 70s.
Mhm.
He's already 71. And so I know for me, like things started to change around where he was starting to lean on me for a lot more stuff, and
Physically and psychologically, or
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, just all around, because he gets to a point where, he just didn't give a shit, man. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? I go to his house and I'd be like, I'd walk in the door on the counter, there's just two full open bags of candy, Snickers and whatever other thing. And he's like, all right, good, you're here. Let's go out back. I want to smoke a cigarette. I'm like, you started smoking again? I'm like, you have severe COPD, bro. I'm like, and what's up with all the candy, dude? You're diabetic, bro. He's like, oh man, I don't give a shit about all that, man. He's like, I'm too old. I'm doing whatever I want now, you know?
Yeah.
And so I remember going outside and I'm just looking at him and he's like, why are you looking at me like that? I'm like, am I looking at you like you could be the dumbest motherfucker on the planet? And he's like, yeah, why are you looking at me like that? I'm like, you remember how when you would say, Joe, you probably shouldn't drink anymore. You're just like one of the people that like can't drink, like 10% of the population. Like, how much more proof do you need? And I'd look at you and I'd say, well, I'm just gonna drink beer for right now.
Mhm.
I was like, so does my face look like how your face looked? And we laughed about that because it had come like full circle
Yeah.
to where it's just like, but again, what that taught me is like, why was my dad choosing things that would hurt him
Yeah.
as what he wanted to do and
Yeah.
not giving a shit?
Right.
And we talked about that and he's like, well, this is just what I like, man. You
Mhm.
know?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, listen, man, you're in your 70s, bro. You can do whatever you want. You know what I'm saying? I'm just letting you know, like, there's consequences, just
Mhm.
like you were telling me. And so I think through that stuff, and again, I'll relate it to as well to what you were saying, is that my whole life growing up was anger. Everything was handled with anger and yelling.
Mm.
I mean, it took me over 10 years of real effort
Mm.
to not raise my voice
Wow.
in my home because it's just so unconscious, bro.
Mm.
It was so unconscious, you know? And like it's one of those things where like similar to you, it's like I come home, I'm 6, and my foot is all bloody because I stubbed my toe and I cut it up and I'm screaming. And I come inside and I'm met with someone screaming at me because I hurt myself.
Mm. Mhm.
And if I just would have listened and you always wear shoes when you go outside, this wouldn't have happened. But here's the thing, as a kid, I'm receiving that as there's something wrong with me.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Whereas later on in life, once I healed, And then I had good, solid, deep conversations with my dad. He couldn't handle seeing me in pain
Yes.
because it brought up so much fear for him of his needs never being met.
Mm,
And if I would have just listened to him, that control, right? Because if you're the adult child of an alcoholic, you're trying to control everything because your whole life's out of control when you grow up with an alcoholic mother. So then it's like since he's so afraid and he's in so much pain from seeing me hurting this way, frantic, the only emotion that he knows unconsciously how to handle that is to meet it with force and anger,
yeah.
you know? So again, like, is that good? Is that bad? I mean, I don't really know. I know it wasn't good for me in that moment, right? Because it was more like I just wanted my dad to tug me and tell me he was all right and then help me go clean up my foot. And
Yeah.
like, and like the fact that a 6-year old crazy boy, like crazy outside type kid is gonna I was always hurt, bro,
Yeah.
because I was a maniac.
Scabs everywhere. Yeah.
Right, yeah. So it's like, so again, but that stuff is so deeply ingrained. He didn't know that stuff was going on until he was older in life, right? And so, um, again,
We,
pass down, pass down, pass
yeah.
down, pass down, and like that's the whole thing.
Well, another thing the movie did so beautifully, the way they timed out sequences, was the thing they never said out loud that you I took from it was is painful as this was for Bruce. Without that dad, there is no Bruce.
Of
There is no
course.
there is no Born to Run. There is no
Yeah.
and
The wounds and the wisdom.
the wounds and the wisdom. And then I also know a little bit about Bruce's relationship with his kids through a friend who happens to know Bruce. And it's much healthier. And he's talked openly about this in interviews. This is my favorite thing about him is like as he's gotten older, he's just sharing everything, all his wisdom, all his lessons, he's openly telling all the stories and do with it what you will. It's beautiful. And I think his wife Patty was a very big part of that. But he had to work at it and be more present and be a better dad and not just be crazy artist up in the loft doing something. Don't worry because that's where the money comes from and just let him do his thing. It just and come down once in a while and have dinner and give a hug until that became something he actually craved. And it sounds to me like again choice and chance. Joe, you said it took you 10 years. First of all, you had to decide to make the change to give up drinking even though your own dad couldn't get it through to you that that was something you needed to entertain. And then so was there choices, and it sounds to me like it's much more choice for you. What led to you deciding I've got to stop yelling and flying off the handle all the time in reaction to stuff? Did you have a counselor? Did you have a mentor? Did you have a friend who was telling you, Joe, this can't be? Or was that
Uh,
just you?
no, I mean, well, number one, it was me. Uh, Number two was definitely my relationship counselor that I saw. Um, because because I would talk to him about things that were going on, and I say, yeah, and then I start yelling, and he's like, "What?" I was like, "Yeah," and then I'd start yelling this or that, and he's like, "Okay, let, first rule to relationships: no yelling, no yelling, none, zero."
Yeah.
Right? So that was number one, me, then that, then two, then the third one was, of course, like my wife, right? She's like the opposite of
Mhm.
that. Then another one is, and this is a more selfish reason, but it's very real. And I bet you and all the men listening can resonate with this. I got tired of having to make amends and discuss situations about my overreaction
Mm,
rather than my overreaction was about.
yes.
It's like I just whitewashed everything that happened before that because I acted like such an asshole that like now we're not even addressing that at all. And that's problematic, bro.
Hmm.
Right? To where now there's zero. Again, this isn't a tit for tat type thing. I'm not saying that. But if I don't show up in a space of healthy accountability and hold a space for safety and trust, like, then how am I going to like allow someone to grow and develop in their own mistakes
Yeah.
and have them make amends and have them grow and make mistakes and all of that stuff? If we're always talking about how much of a jerk I'm being,
Yeah. You're
right?
you're deflecting, you're giving them a reason to deflect their own growth because you are the bigger asshole.
Yeah. And that's always what it was, right? It's always like a one up, like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm going to end this. It's like, okay, yeah, sure you are. You
Yeah.
know, it's like when you watch the cop videos and you're like, bro, police officer, don't escalate it. You should have de-escalated. And it's like watching myself in a relationship argument,
Right.
you know?
Right.
But so I think it was all of those things. And then the other thing is too, is like, bro, I'm already loud. I'm talking normal and my voice resonates through, it just echoes through the house.
Hmm.
And now that I have Violet that's coming up on 1 years old, like it took her a little bit to get used to my voice,
Mm.
because it's that powerful, right? And you don't think about that as a man of
Right.
what that means to other people that are around you.
Mm. Hmm.
So, you know, it took time, but a lot of practice. I still have slip ups here and there, but it's very rare, bro.
Hmm.
It's very rare just because it doesn't help anything, you
Yeah.
know?
It's interesting. This idea of emotional release has been on my mind as well lately because I started crying, Joe, and I was so grateful to cry because I had not cried with everything I've been through and put myself through and put others through over the last year and a half. There should have been a lot of tears, and there were moments, but I kind of would wonder, is like, yeah, you're not gonna cry, and other people would say, have you even cried about this? I'm like, not really. And all of a sudden, I'm finding myself, and dude, I'm not talking about, oh, I worked up a tear an hour straight. I'm listening to Jeff Buckley, and I'm crying through the whole record. And I thought, well, this is good. This is a breakthrough. And then you know what I realized? I got off my meds by accident. I didn't put them in the pill box for whatever reason. Again, maybe God. And it occurred to me and like, oh wow, I haven't been taking the SSRT for like you're not supposed to cold turkey that shit. I should have stepped down, but I unknowingly cold turkeyed it. There's only 10 milligrams. It wasn't extreme, but I'm like, okay, I'm feeling again. And you don't realize that little thing, my therapist told me, he goes, they're not supposed to be an ongoing thing. It's something you might help you through a moment and then you get off of it. You just, because you have lazy doctors that are like, yeah, okay, you're taking this, taking that, just keep taking it. And I wasn't feeling. And so what made me think of that, Joe, was you saying, you are a man and you're built the way you're built. And sometimes that leads to an outburst. And of course, we want to evolve past that. But what is the balance between you learning and again, what better lens through the eyes of an infant, the thing you want to protect more than anything in this world at their fragile state, and it's your daughter, and you're scaring her sometimes just by being you. Not because you're yelling angry at her or anybody else, but you just have a booming voice and it's
Oh yeah.
discombobulating to her. So have you thought about that balance of like, well, I can't just stop being me altogether because I need some of that fire, but
Yes. Yeah, and I think what it is, Kevin, is that like all things, the pendulum swings
mhm,
and it slowly starts to slow down to get to center.
mhm,
And so it's like I I recognize more than anything that my father's total inability. So my mother has a great quote about Daroma boys. She says, Daroma boys are genetically predisposed to enjoying the sound of their own voice. And quite often, your father, the leader of these boys, uh, you'll notice that there hasn't ever been a thought that has not crossed his lips,
mhm. Wow.
right? So it's
Mhm.
like, if you thought it, well, you got to say it,
Can't let it
you
go to
know?
waste. Yeah.
Right. So on my backdrop of my phone back in 2011 for the entire year, I had this thing that I heard from Deepak Chopra, right? The four questions to ask yourself before talking. Is it kind? Is it true? Is it necessary? Does it improve upon the silence? Right? And I practiced that for an entire year, bro. And I still that pause, right? In recovery, we call it pause when agitated, right?
Mhm.
Because you can't unsay stuff.
Yeah.
I just want to take backseat. It's like that doesn't work, bro. So here's the cool thing. When my dad passed away, and my dad and I used to talk about this a lot too, because I was like, Dad, you know I'm learning all this shit, right? I was like, you know why I'm like this, right? Ah, we'd be laughing about it, you know. And so my dad started working on it. And so my dad was a very different man. Like he beat to his own drum, you know? Like he had a minivan since they first came out, and he always drove a minivan. And he was a man's man, but for practical sense, it was the easiest thing for him to move his equipment around to go from bar to bar, pick it up and tear it down. Way better than a truck. It was shielded. You know, the station wagons went out. It was a higher build than that. You could fit your monitors and stands and everything in it.
Yeah.
He carried a purse as well for over 40 years. And so when I was cleaning out his purse, tucked right behind his license, he had this little piece of paper and it was typed out. And my dad was very organized and disciplined. And he had those four questions in that
Wow.
tucked behind his license,
Wow.
you know? So you have these little moments like that where it's like, I mean, did my dad ever get to a point where I'm at now? No, he didn't. But he was trying, dude.
Yeah.
He was trying. He was really doing his best, you
Yeah.
know? And my upbringing was way better than his. Way better, you
Yeah.
know? Him and his three brothers all joined the military right out of high school to get out of their home to go to Vietnam. They're basically choosing death over living in their own home, right? So it's like I can't imagine what that was like. So it's like I was telling you earlier before we started the episode, it was like a stepping stone,
Mhm.
you know, and it's like my dad took a step forward farther than his father ever did. You know, I barely even knew my pop. I probably talked to him 10 times my whole life. Never
Yeah.
even had a relationship with him.
Yeah.
You know, my dad had a good relationship with my kids um, and had a better relationship with me once I was an adult, you know, which
Yeah.
was far better than what he had with his dad, it was just never anything. And then now I'm a highly engaged, attentive parent who shows up and is actively trying. So it's like you can see these elevations and consciousness that have to happen over generations, but similar to like what you were saying, both of our dads want us to be better than them.
Yeah.
And like they're trying hard for us.
Yeah.
There's not any other men on the planet that are doing that for us,
Yeah.
that want us to be better than them, you know?
Right.
So it's like that. I feel really good about that because for all of the wounds, like I said, and that I got from my dad, there's so much of me that is him, that is good. Like all of how I run my business, so disciplined, so organized, and like how I run my life, so productive and disciplined and organized. That's how my dad was. And he was a musician, bro.
Yeah.
But again, it's like he was built that way because he went so hard on the things he could control because
Mm.
his whole life was out of control growing up,
Mm. Right.
right?
Yeah.
Because the neurosis and the constant inconsistency of alcoholics, it's just it's debilitating for
Yeah.
children.
Yeah. Um, as we wrap up here, and I only do that for time, unfortunately, because I have another call. But uh, your son, fortunately, knew your dad, had a relationship with him. Violet won't have that. What do you want Violet to know about your dad?
He did the best he could. He did the best he could. He pursued a life following his own dream. I don't know too many people that, got to play music and sing for the president, travel the world doing it, raised a family doing it for over 50 years. Most musicians would love to make a living
Sure.
doing what they love because that's very rare,
Yes.
and a lot um and so what I would say is that your energy, your enthusiasm, and your lust for life was passed down from him for sure. Because my dad was the epitome of what an entertainer is. It's like if he was awake, he was on stage, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, but I think the last thing I'll say is that one of the things that I pulled out of the middle passage for today that our buddy Jim Hollis said was, we're all prisoners of our histories until we become the authors of our own lives.
Mm.
And I think for you and I both, bro, what we talked about today is just that.
Yeah.
It's like we had to work through what was passed on to us in order and then unlearn some of those things to become who it is that we are today, while
Yeah.
still taking the good of what our fathers gave us.
That's right. Yeah. And I think of people in all kinds of circumstances. It's when you out in the world, you see people sometimes in a young person, and you think, my God, I don't think that person has any positive influence in their life. I don't think anybody's trying to tell them smart stuff in a
Hmm.
caring way. So what are they going to do? But then we hear these amazing stories of people who, in that exact condition, finding a way out. And so I think there's a little fire in everybody, in an inner voice that knows you have some stuff to work on, and then the choice you make is deciding to do it and not ignore it and not bury it. And the library's free, man. And all you need to know is in there somewhere. But it's the choice to go look for those answers, or join a club where there's mentors, boys and girls club, or whatever it is. There are resources. There are, doesn't have to be by chance that somebody comes into your life and shows you a better way. If you want it, it's out there. And if you're a man who's done some living and has some wisdom to pass on, look for ways to do it. Risk the awkwardness of saying to your kid's friend or the neighbor kid or whatever, hey, I see you and I want to share something. That cool with you? Can I tell you a quick story? And just give them a lesson. Because I think not only whether or not they soak up the wisdom, the fact that you cared enough to do it could be a big turning point.
Yeah, and if you have friends and they have kids, make sure you pour into them.
Yeah.
Because us other fathers appreciate that, because we know often our own kids got the Charlie Brown teacher symptom when it comes
Yeah.
to wisdom, you know. So again, man, we appreciate you guys so much, Kevin and I. Make sure you guys like, subscribe to the podcast. Most importantly, share it with somebody that might resonate with them, spark a conversation, or if we may say so, help them, right? And start engaging in these types of conversations with themselves and others. As always, I'm always telling you guys how amazing of a writer Kevin is. Make sure you subscribe to our Substack so you can get the written download of Kevin's thoughts, energy, feelings of this topic in the written form, which I love. And you can go to maninthemiddleshow.com and sign up for that newsletter that'll come weekly when we launch the episode for the podcast as well. So, as always, thank you guys so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week.